Hello and welcome for a new episode at Mindset Mastery. I'm your host Ahmed Asaf, and we have an amazing guest today, Mr. Nakhil Raval. How are you today?
Hi, Ahmed. Very well. I hope things are well at your end.
All good. Nakhil is a leadership, learning, and change organization development expert. Emphasizes the transformative power of learning in societies. He underscores the vital role organizations play in serving society. So, with all that today and this great experience, more than 25 years between US and Asia, today we're going to dive deep in a very amazing topic, which is Gen Z. So, tell us from who are Gen Z first?
Yeah, well, excellent, Ahmed. So, most companies today are likely to have what is normally referred now as a multi-generational workforce, which means people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, perhaps even. And then, of course, you have on this end, their 20s and 30s, right? And so
Mhm.
essentially, there are about five generations. There's a total of seven, but for our audiences, there are about four, which we could think could be in the corporate world, right? So there is the baby boomer generation, Generation X, Generation Y, or the millennials, and then there's the Gen Z.
Okay.
And so Gen Z is the youngest of the cohort, which is entering the workforce. Well, they've already entered perhaps 2 to 3 years now. The eldest of the Gen Z would be between 25, 27. And so a few years of work life. And they're essentially considered Gen Z born between 97 to 2012.
Mm-hmm.
From most experts, that's the age, those are the years in which we define the Gen Z. And their context is, really a group of individuals who have been born into technology. So they're also called Zoomers, iGen, Next Gen, and all these terms that are used. But essentially, what differentiates them between, let's say, the Gen Y and Gen Z is that the Gen Y accepted technology and Gen Z expects technology, which is to say that they were born into social media, born into the internet, and so they don't know a world which is outside of that, right? And so
Amazing.
the context has been very, very different. A lot of global events that have happened where Gen Z in Saudi Arabia could relate to it, in India, in Africa, in any other part of the world. But the common denominator for most Gen Z is technology. So they're very wired with technology. And they've seen, of course, some common events, as I said, across the globe, like climate change or the pandemic, or
Mhm.
the revolution that is happening in technology with AI and deep fakes and so on, right? So the local context could be different, but they have a lot in common, which kind of defines the Gen Z in one sense.
Amazing. So, if we want first, because you believe that enhancing the leadership skills benefits the individual himself and the one who's leading and the broader community. So, everyone is affected by that. If we need to start talking about a little bit more, dive more about the Gen Z. So, how could we understand their mindset? How could we talk to them? Because as you said they are between 12 years old to 27 years old. So now they are somehow the next generation that are leading our economy. So we have to understand them. What are the strategies that you could tell us so we could just talk to them,
Yes,
connect with them?
absolutely. And you're absolutely correct, Ahmed, because in a lot of markets, a lot of geographies, as you rightly said, in companies, if not today, if we had to fast forward out, let's say 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, you have a room of people. There's a good chance that it could be filled with, managers who are from Gen X generation or Gen Y predominantly, and a little bit, a few of Gen Z. But in many markets, in many countries, such as in Asia or in other parts of the world, right? The demographics are tilted where, if I had to fast forward out,
Hmm.
there will be more of Gen Ys and Gen Z, which means that if you have a 30, 40-year runway ahead of you, there's a good chance that you have to manage a Gen Z or eventually get managed by a Gen Z. So it's in good interest to know, how they're wired. And again, as I said, they're technology bound. So I think these are folks where if you don't speak that language, you've lost them. And therefore, I see a lot of companies, there's a big talk about digitization, AI, ML, right? And in many companies where you don't see that, so there is an element of patience that they don't have, which the managers perhaps feel that, look, they want everything instant. And so I think if we have to lead Gen Z, to your question, I would say there are 3 or 4 things. Number one, you must provide them feedback as you're bringing them on board. And when I say feedback, normally feedback could be something, at the end of a project or end of an assignment, or let's say at the end of a appraisal cycle or something like that. That's all fine. But here's a generation, which expects instant sort of response, because that's the life that they live, right? So if I put something on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, I'm getting an immediate feedback of, my post getting likes or dislikes or comments or whatever, right? So in many ways, I've seen companies where if you can get into a routine of giving very informal feedback and immediately, I think that is something that will work. Otherwise, you will just see that they feel disengaged, they feel demoralized, or they feel that maybe what and so I think and I've seen many companies doing away with the traditional appraisal cycles just because they feel that more informal real-time feedback is one way. The other is just helping them develop, Ahmad, because as you see that we're entering now a phase which Gen Z is also often called the AI generation, or the next generation, which is the alpha generation, called the AI generation, because so much is changing, right? So the speed of pace at which technology has changed from, let's say, the middle of the early 18th century to today is just, it's not a linear curve, right? So we had electricity and television that we saw, maybe it took 1 full century to come up with that. But if you look at just the last 50 years, you've seen so much from automated from what we call industry 4.0, 3.0 to 4.0 to now 5.0, right? So Internet of Things and AI and ML. And what it means for the talent in this rapid pace is that we need to develop a competency of learning agility. And this is important as much for the manager as it is for the Gen Z. When I say learning agility, I mean that you have to be able to quickly be able to unlearn something of the past and then learn something of the future. So I'll just give one quick example,
Yes.
and I'll limit my response to just these 2 things. So if you look at COVID, Ahmad, right? COVID taught us so many things, right? A traditional COVID kind of a pandemic, for example, the vaccine would have taken 7-8 years, but we had to undo that to make it from 8 to 2 years and then down to 1 year in many places, right?
Mhm.
And so we had to unlearn our old way of doing it. Now, even just getting the vaccine wasn't good enough, right? In the early days, right, we had to learn, okay, who's going to get it, how much, how do we ship it to places, what's the pricing for these things, what's the communication strategy, right? So what I'm saying is that I think more and more problems are becoming more complex, and so you need to have a transdisciplinary view. And therefore, I think that learning agility is a big thing that as managers, as companies, we have to kind of put ourselves into it, but also be mindful that here is a generation which is entering a workforce where there's this prediction that, hey, a lot of doomsday scenarios of AI taking their jobs. So how do we skill them? How do we upskill them in an environment where rapidly the entry level jobs could be automated or gone, right? So let's keep it. I'm keeping it for simple for 2 things.
Yes.
Learning agility is a competency that we should build in them, and then being able to give them frequent feedback. Those are the 2 that will keep it. I could go long, but hopefully that gives you some idea that yes, we have to lead them slightly differently.
Yeah, and if we want to dive deeper and deeper, and we want to talk to them directly, to Gen Z, because I'm sure some of them, they are stuck, or some of them they are just working in the wrong direction. So how could we guide them regarding the money relationship, if they're planning to be an entrepreneurship, and or if they're looking for a purpose. So how could we guide them with those challenges in this life?
Yeah, no, excellent question. I think, there used to be a term that most of us, perhaps of our age, that we may have heard is called the midlife crisis, which is that when you get to about 45, 50, or about around that time, life feels like a big puzzle that perhaps we haven't solved with, family responsibilities and kids and our your own career, health, parents, and so on. Now, that term seems to have been there, but there's a new term which has also been there, which is called the quarter life crisis, which is to say that that crisis has fast forwarded at least 25 years, and it's a crisis from the context that here is a Gen Z or people in that generation, right? They are in their 20s, they're coming out, they go into a college studying something, thinking that I will become this, and it turns out that they try a career in finance and perhaps they don't like it, and or they try a career in entrepreneurship and perhaps they find it too hard as opposed to what they had thought. So many of the things that they thought it could be, it may not have turned out, and so there is a question mark in their minds that, okay, who am I? What's my identity? What
Yes.
do I do? And also the fact that there is a generation who doesn't have experience but are also expecting success very, very quickly, right? And many of us have also been in that situation where we may have gone to a college and thinking that, I'm going to study finance and be an investment banker for the next 30 years. And it turns out that maybe 5 years from now, from that date, we just end up doing something else for a variety of reasons. So I think good mentorship is very important for this generation. And I have known companies where I think the more you can take the time to role model some of these things, it helps them. And the fact that they also have gone through a 2.5, 3 year period of pandemic, which has also impacted many people at different generations' mental well-being. So there is things of isolation and loneliness and so on. So that's another element. And the third, I would say, which is very important, Ahmed, is that we're living in times where there is so much information and misinformation, which means to say that today, if I read a news about some conflict happening in Middle East, I see one view. And if I see another media channel, they'll give me another view, right? So, it's very easy to get influenced by some of these things very quickly. And for that generation, that's the world that they've been living in. And so I think we owe it to them to build critical thinking skills, so that we say that, look, you have to kind of do your own homework of what is happening. Number two, develop patience. Just as I mentioned, that success isn't linear. It takes time. You have to discover yourself, and just helping them also be mentally more resilient, right? Yeah. So I mean, again, just I'll keep it brief, but I think those are some of the things that I think as managers, if we can do that, we can unleash a lot of the creativity potential that they have.
That's amazing. If we want to talk with the parents, because you're telling that it's starting from 12 years old and
Yeah.
even especially at 18 years old. So how could we, or how could they make decisions regarding what major they should do, what career path they should take? And especially most of them, they are just somehow, I don't want to say lost, but they don't know how to make decisions because no one taught them how to take decisions and the necessity of making decisions. So how could we just give them an advice regarding that to the parents and to Gen Z?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think an excellent question, Ahmed. So I think a lot of what is happening, again, when you think about this, what career is relevant, what should I study, right? I think if we look kind of from the job perspective or the market perspective, I think increasingly we're going, companies are, leaning towards what is called, it's becoming a more skill-based economy versus a economy which I would not say it doesn't value degree, right? So you could have gotten 2 degrees, you could have gotten 1 degree, but if you don't have the requisite skills, then there is a problem. And companies today are increasingly looking for very specific skills to solve the problem, right? So in many ways, I think if the parents can and the teachers in the schools or the professors in the college system can appreciate what is happening outside, and then they can work backwards. I think that becomes important. In many of the education systems, they've been teaching what they're teaching for years and years and so on. And so I think we need to relook at that. Also, the fact that in today's time, Ahmed, unlike in some cultures, in some markets, I know, like I can speak in Asia and in India, back in the day, they said you only have 3 career choices. You can be an engineer, or a chartered accountant, or a medical doctor, and that's it. And then if you didn't fit in these 3, you pretty much can
Good
figure
luck.
out, do something on your own, and good luck with you.
Yeah,
But yeah, and so I
everywhere.
think
It's not only in India, it's everywhere.
yeah,
Somehow.
yeah, in many places. So it's so I think what we need to let the parents know that the career the definition of career has expanded. Number one, number two, we need to let the teachers, professors, parents be understanding that look, they could have studied finance, but very unlikely that they will end their career in 40 years in finance. They will likely try 5 things, 6 things, 7 things in their lifetime or more before they figure out that, okay, this is what I like, this is what I want, this is what I'm enjoying. And therefore, I think even that expectation, if we're having, is not true. I've seen engineers doing sales. I've seen chartered accountants doing, so I think there is no more this term called career ladder. It's called career lattice, which means that you can do something, try something different. You can try then something different, then different, right? And I think that the biggest thing from a corporate perspective, I'll just make one last comment, is that there's the basic, the age-old 70-20-10 model, which means that 70% of what you learn comes from on the job, right? So if schools can design curriculum where they can learn by doing, it kind of goes in. If colleges can do that, it helps them. And certainly when you're in the workplace,
The biggest thing.
most amount of learning comes when you're on the job with a client, talking to someone. 20% comes from peers, right? So it's important to build relationships, have mentors, have people who can help you. And then the 10% comes from formal training. So I think that experiential, immersive element of learning is very, very important.
You talk about lots of important things that first about you talk about the education system. I'm not against the education system, but it needs somehow upgrade. And you talk about the skill sets. So
Yeah.
if you could tell us some skill sets that let them start, let's say give us 5 skill sets that you would advise them to start working on them immediately. What would
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that every year I believe there is a list that gets printed out or gets published
Mhm.
when there's the summit that happens in Davos, right? Which is, okay,
Yeah.
what's the future of work skills, and it keeps changing, but there's always a few common skills over a period of time, and
Mhm.
we've seen so one that has come again and again, again, problem solving. Right now, you don't have to be an engineer to say that, okay, only engineers, it's the engineer's job, right? I think the problem solving as a mindset is important, right? So as I mentioned, if COVID has taught us something, you could be a best and a smartest pharmaceutical graduate in 2020, but you still haven't solved the problem. Vaccine is one part of the problem. Like, you had to figure out like 5 other problems, like shipping and pricing and communication strategy. So I think problem solving is one which is in general very important. So that's one. And I see that in Asian and in some cultures, like in our cultures, right? I see that, okay, there's a larger emphasis on that, so which is fine. But at the same token, I would say, for example, creativity, those are equally important, because more and more, companies like Google, tech companies are looking for different ways to solve problem, right?
Mhm.
And so they are looking for lateral thinking. They're looking for, not just a room which is filled with engineers. They're looking for designers. They're looking for people who may have spent time in, the military or the army. So again, different perspectives, right? And that's where innovation comes in, right? It's just a different lens. And so that is equally important. Third, as I mentioned, learning agility, the competency seems, again, increasingly important in their lifetime. So, if we fast forward, what AI is now, and most experts say it's in its infancy, right? In what it can do, and companies are spending billions and billions, right? So if we were to fast forward out, right? I mean, what will happen, right? And it's already killing, I would say, in my view, some of that critical thinking skills. So that would be the third one I said that, right? Where I see my son that, okay, there's an assignment, and in some cases, if he's falling behind, he'll say, I don't have to worry. I'll just ask ChatGPT. I'll get an answer. I'll take it. And it's quite dangerous. And so I think it makes them lazy. It takes away the creativity, the problem solving skills. So that's the third. The fourth would be communication, Ahmed, because, as I mentioned, I was recently there in a conference for 500 people, of which 50% were millennials. And their number one question as they started the conference was that how do we help them communicate? So they're using emojis, they're using voice notes. And, we have to understand that context, but there's also a need for them to build the skill to articulate, right? You cannot communicate with clients or you cannot sign contracts with emojis. And therefore, some basic importance of why communication matters, oral communication, written communication, that's one. And then I would say, lastly, the skill of resilience. Again, I don't know if there's a way to kind of teach that, but build it over time, right? Because here's a generation, I would say, very fragile. I be cautious, but I've even heard many people say someone who with low self-esteem. In other words, they get quickly, rejected. They feel rejected if a comment doesn't come on social media, or they quickly feel isolated and so I think the social skills and resilience is another one which is very, very important, especially for this generation, because they've seen so much in their lifetime. They're seeing 2 to 3 wars. They've seen a pandemic. They've seen climate crisis. They're seeing the fake news movement. They're seeing all these things that are happening. And so I think that would be a big thing in my mind. Those are the 4 or 5 general that, I mean, we could say more. Yeah.
If we could engage this in the education system, how much it will be affected. And
yeah,
I'm not against the education system, but just think about 3 things they never thought about. Number 1 is who we are, how we think, how we act, how we feel. Number 2, which is how to earn money. And it's not about going to school, university, and having a degree and then going to the workforce and going to the market. It's not about it. You could have like degree in an economics, but you don't know how to earn money. And number 3,
right.
the necessity of making decisions.
Yes.
So if we should talk about the relationship with money and earning money, how could we just make it simple to them and educate them about the relationship with money?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ahmed. I think I would say globally, Ahmed. Again, I don't have any concrete figures, but I can say, like, even in a country like India, for instance, where traditionally, like, one or the elder generations were considered to be quite good in saving money and the money habits, if you will. But if you think about Gen Y, Gen Z onwards, right, they've been born into what is called the shared economy, and which means they have seen Uber and Airbnb, and therefore, and so much credit is available today. Like, banks will come out of their way to give you a card and so on, and so therefore, I think money itself is becoming easy to get. But you're right that if you're not careful about understanding the skills of money, you're getting into a trap of debt, you're getting into a trap of not knowing what is happening to you, and then there is no financial independence. And I think, for most of us who know this well at an early age, know that how important it is. I remember back in my early days as a financial advisor, we would always say that till about 35, 40, right, there are 2 phases to our life. There's a part of life in which we earn money, and there's a part of life in which we live from the money that we've earned, right? And so I think basic financial planning, forget about the more complex stuff, basic planning of budgeting, saving, debt. If I have to go to college, what are the pros and cons of doing one versus other? If I have to buy a car, what's the pro of, buying it versus taking a loan? Simple things like that. And I think if we can just create that habit, I think it goes a long way, and it's just the mindset, right? And I've seen in so many families, Ahmad, in business families, right, where that kind of training is given so early on, they become so much more savvy with money. And when I say savvy, you could have a team of people to give you advice on more complex decisions, but the basic understanding that, okay, do I over leverage myself on a business by taking debt, which is 5 times than who I am, and things like that. I'm saying that, that applies to us as individuals as much.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I think I would say, go back to your point that the school systems, Emma, and I remember taking a class in 2019 to school children where school systems can play an extremely important role, and even the college, in just doing, I don't know, as simple as a 2-day workshop or a simple basic course on money habits, right?
If you
And the
could,
sooner we start, the
yes,
better.
give us some just money habits. Just give us three. So let's start installing new habits with the Gen Z.
Yeah, I think very simple. Be very careful of just, first is understanding, the concept of saving, right? We can talk through that on so many aspects, right? It is not that you save. Let's say if I'm earning, let's say $1,000, it is not that I have to save 60, 70, 80%, but it's the power of just the mindset to save first and then let it compound over time, right? And so I think saving to begin with is very important. And then over time, we can tell our children or tell the young Gen Z that, look, it will do its thing as long as you can be more disciplined about it, right? I've seen people who are probably not making very much in their early days of career, but they've been very disciplined to say that, you know what, I will adjust my lifestyle, but every paycheck there will be something that will go for investments, go for saving, go for. So savings is one which is very easy. Number two, we have to be very careful about debt, in the trap that the debt can that we can all fall in, and which means that just not get lured into things like, okay, I want to get that car easily, or I want to get that bike or whatever, right? Today, I mean, there is easy credit available for so many things and so quickly. And so I think credit card companies like that when we don't pay on time or when we only pay minimum, that's they like those customers, and we don't we don't want to be those customers. And the third is, over a period of time, just develop an acumen or interest in growing money. So one is saving, the other one is growing, right? The growing says that, okay, I don't have to be a chartered accountant or a banker, but I need to know the basics, right? Okay, what's the difference between equities and fixed income? What's the difference between, growth stocks and, more small cap stocks? So basic understanding is good enough. Over a period of time, you can have experts to manage that for you, but still, no one can look out after your money better than you can. And so
100%.
that understanding is very important. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So whether you are a boss managing a young talent or an educator in a school or simply a parent of a Gen Z, this podcast really unleashed lots of necessary wisdoms and to understand them, and even to Gen Z themselves, to understand themselves, which is the most important thing, and know their purpose in life. So, and know their self better and get better results, because the more you understand yourself, the better you get results, and to understand the infinite potential within them, because they are perfect. No one's smarter than you. I'm talking to you, Gen Z. So what would be your last message to them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you said it well. This is a generation that has so much potential. They're very tech savvy. They're very passionate about things like climate, sustainability. They value mental health, which is in the previous generation always perhaps even seen as, as taboo and things like that. So they want to be very clear about, I'm signing up for something where there's a value exchange. It's not something where I just come and give you time and you give me money, right? So they want to learn. So I think in many ways they're a vocal generation. So in many ways they are setting a new kind of a precedence, which we can all learn from. And I would again just say that again for all those who are managing Gen Z, be patient. I think I think there's a lot that we can learn from them. And then as far as the Gen Zs are concerned, I would say again, develop patience, have an open mind in understanding other generation, just as they are trying to understand your generation. And, I think you have a long career, long life ahead of you. So very exciting times where you're seeing so much more than the others have seen. And, I think, there's infinite potential. So let's help them and make them successful.
Thank you for those insights. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Nakhil, for this amazing episode. And
Lovely.
thank you so much.
Really enjoyed it, Ahmed. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Thank you.